Hi. Normally we conduct our interviews at the interview bar in the studio, but for this particular occasion, we're here in the meatpacking district of New York City at the Gaslight Lounge. It's the only not super trendy place in the horribly trendy meatpacking district. And it's actually one of my favorite bars in the area. With me right now, the president of the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, Greg Lukianoff. Hello, Greg.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. You are a drinker of Maker's Mark.
I love Maker's Mark.
Cheers. So, Na zdrowie, tovarich. Tell me, what is the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education?
FIRE was founded in 1999 by Harvey Silverglate, who's a liberal-leaning libertarian, and Alan Charles Kors, who's a conservative-leaning libertarian.
Okay.
And they started seeing cases increasingly where students weren't getting in trouble for what they did, they were increasingly getting in trouble for what they said. And Alan was instrumental at Penn for fighting fighting speech codes at Penn. And when a student actually got in trouble for yelling out of his window, "Shut up, you go home, you water buffaloes," to a African-American sorority that was serenading them at 3 o'clock in the morning,
right,
and he was brought up in charge of racial harassment, this all became sort of national news. They wrote a book called The Shadow University in 1998, and they received so many requests for help after that that they decided they needed to start up an organization just to fight for free speech on campus.
So what is a speech code?
They're codes that ban offensive speech, hurtful speech, demeaning speech, for example. And we've been keeping track of these for years. And we now actually have an attorney on staff whose entire job practically is to keep track of these. And we evaluate the top 400 schools in the country. And our 2012 study showed that 65% of colleges maintain what we call red light speech codes, as in kind of like laughably unconstitutional.
How does this happen? How did we wind up with speech codes like this?
I think there's a lot of factors at play, but not the least of which in the 80s, there became this very sort of paternalistic and kind of insulting idea that with the increase in diversity on college campuses, that students couldn't be trusted to actually get along with each other, so let's ban hurtful speech.
So you can't celebrate the diversity, you have to just not talk about it.
Just everybody, let's throw up the white flag and shut up.
I would think that of all places, a college campus would be the best place for you to kind of get out there, express opinions, ideas, concepts, some of which may be hurtful or just not, unpalatable or distasteful or whatever, but isn't that the whole point?
Yeah, it's the great bamboozlement that universities have duped a generation or even more than one generation of students to believe that they actually, the highest goal is for them to have their feelings protected as opposed to their minds challenged.
What made you get involved in this? Did you have a personal experience?
I went to law school specifically to study First Amendment law.
Okay.
It's always been my passion. The joke is, but it's totally true, is my mother's British and my father's Russian.
Okay.
And Russian emphasizes always be honest, and English emphasizes always be polite.
And not dentistry.
And that basically I realized at Christmas when I was 4 that you can't always be honest and polite.
Right. I mean, certainly free speech doesn't entitle you to say only things that don't hurt people.
Yeah.
I think Westboro Baptist Church is a perfect example.
Yeah.
They're insane,
yeah,
I would say, but they do have a right.
The hypocrisy blows me away on this case. The double standards blows me away because you can't actually have a speech code that requires that nobody can be offended and apply it fairly across the board. It's just impossible. That would reduce everybody to silence.
There's no such thing as freedom from offense.
Exactly. If you haven't been offended during your time in college, if you haven't had your deepest belief challenged, chances are you haven't learned anything new.
Well, give me an egregious example of something that's just absolutely outrageous.
So many. A student at Syracuse.
Our producer went to Syracuse and some other people on staff. Good.
He's
so far so good.
He's donating his time to work in an inner city high school. I relate to this because I used to work in inner city high schools in D.C. And he's getting up at 6:30 in the morning. This is a really rough school. They don't have air conditioning. Like he's really committed to helping these kids out. And someone from the program comes in, gets irritated that they're not getting students from historically black colleges, and they're just getting these white kids from Syracuse. And the kid takes some offense to this. He's like, he doesn't feel appreciated. And so he writes on Facebook, this is basically that this is like racism. Like, why are we totally okay with this? Like, are you saying that I should stay on my side of the tracks? He just vents about the fact that he feels like he was insulted, and he kind of was insulted. They kicked him out of the program. They made him do like something like mandatory psychological counseling. They made him go through all these hoops just to have the chance of getting back into school. And again, only for complaining about a comment that he thought was racist.
Which sounds, I mean, if it sounds like, why is that white guy here?
Yeah.
It does sound slightly offensive to somebody who's donating their time and trying to help somebody else.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's also something he wrote on his Facebook page,
right.
You know, where you'd think that you're allowed to vent. And they really went after this kid. And it was only when we took this public a couple of weeks ago and this happens all the time. University is like, oh, we were going to let him back in anyway. And it's like, really?
I did get a sense of that from looking at your website, which is thefire.org.
Thefire.org.
Reading a lot of these stories, when challenged, a lot of these places that start to wither under any kind of scrutiny because they have no argument.
They have no argument.
Do you think they have an agenda, or they're just clumsily, this is a dumb bureaucracy thing that's just stumbling along, enforcing dumb rules?
My general theory is that there's a lot of different things going on. Like the University of Delaware program, that was an agenda. That was an agenda and a half. This was a program for all 7,000 students in the dorms. It included mandatory one-on-one sessions with your RAs, mandatory floor meetings, where literally you were asked where you stood on different hot-button social issues, and if you had the wrong opinion, you stood on the bad guy wall, and the right opinion, you stood on the hero wall.
That's horrifying.
It's horrifying. But even creepier, you had these one-on-one sessions with your RAs. The freshman girl, male RA, gets a questionnaire about her what races and sexes she would date. But I feel bad for the RA in this case because he was obliged to give this to her. And when she got to the question of when did you discover your sexuality, her answer was none of your damn business, and she got written up for it. So that's an agenda.
And that's Delaware.
That's the University of Delaware, which I spent a lot of time on that case.
It's Biden town, isn't it? Are you optimistic or pessimistic?
I'm generally an optimist on an awful lot of stuff, but when it comes to higher education, the level of reform and the level of rethinking that we need is dramatic. The good news is, though, we're paying so much more for higher education because of this massive expansion of bureaucracy. So we have common goals here. That a cheaper education might also be one that has to get back to free, that can't have these people policing speech anymore.
Right.
But we need a total rethinking. And the real bright spot that I do see is people aren't unquestioningly saying, oh yeah, $50,000, $60,000 a year for higher education? Oh yeah, I'll sign me up.
Right. Let me tell you when I had sex for the first time. Well, thank you very much for coming, and I do drink a lot faster than, oh no, you caught up with me now. All right, originally I was faster. Greg Lukianoff is the president of the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. They are at thefire.org. You can find them on Twitter at thefire.org.
Thefire.org, yep.
And also at Greg Lukianoff, if you can spell that.
G. Lukianoff.
G. Lukianoff. And thanks very much to the Gaslight Lounge in the Meatpacking District of New York City for hosting us and giving us bourbon. And we will not have a show next week because it's vacation, and I will be somewhere warm. Good night, and good luck.